Welcome, everyone. Welcome to meeting number 5,342 of the Rotary Club of San Jose. Thank you to the Lee Weimers Committee for being the greeting line today. An organization near and dear to my heart. If you've got a guest, could you please come up to the microphone and introduce your guest briefly? Mauricio Cordova.
Hi, President Steve.
Mauricio, hold on a moment.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm not doing very well getting everyone to be quiet. So everyone, please pay attention, if you would. And Mauricio, please introduce your guest today.
Thank you, President Steve. Mauricio Cordova here. I have the pleasure to have my youngest, beautiful daughter, Sydney. She's a junior in Redlands studying chemistry. So she's hanging out with me today. So thank you.
Welcome, Sydney. Thanks for coming.
This is my friend Dee Dee Rogers. She's a small business owner of a IT consulting company specializing in seniors.
Dee Dee, thank you. Welcome. Tim Gill.
Hi, good afternoon, President Steve. We have a guest from International House. Her name is Stefania, I'm sorry. And she's I'll let her talk about herself.
Welcome, Stefania.
Hi, thank you. I am an exchange student. I'm living at the iHouse, and I'm so thankful to be here.
Where are you from, Stefania?
From Italy, from the south of Italy.
Interesting. My name is Steve, and my Croatian grandma called me Stefano. So welcome, Stefania. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Mike.
Good afternoon, President Steve. I'm very happy to introduce two more students from the iHouse. They're Casper and Nora. Casper's from Denmark and Nora's from Finland. And I'm not going to say much more about that. You all know about the iHouse. We have a great committee going. I just want to say that Mike Fulton took a whole bunch of the iHouse students over to Capitola. They had a great weekend. And Nora apparently gained the Northern California Championship in foosball. They're each going to say hello in their native language.
Please do. Thank you.
Hi, Mia.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, and welcome to both of you. Jason.
Hello, President Steve. I have four guests. They're not really my guests. They're actually the speaker's entourage, and they're sitting over here. I could get them to try and at least stand up so the rest of you can see. So the vertically uninhibited one is Tom Moriarty. He's the director of our Writing Across the Curriculum program at San Jose State University and a professor of English and comparative literature. I'll introduce the speaker to you a little later. This is Sala Galia. She's the executive director of corporate and foundation relations. Dean Shannon Miller, my boss, and Provost Vincent Del Casino.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jason, and welcome to all of you. Michael Fulton.
President Steve, I'm here to introduce someone not from the iHouse, from Merrill Lynch in San Jose, and someone who's just told me they want to be a Rotarian with our club, my son, Mitchell Fulton.
Oh, great news. Welcome, Mitchell. Mitchell, the pressure's on. We will be coming to your home. Mike Conniff, come on up for a new member introduction. So a quick story about Dr. Mon, who Mike is about to introduce. I was telling it to someone else earlier. So when I met Dr. Mon, I shook his hand. I said, Dr. Mon, what would you like me to call you? And he said, Dr. Mon.
I'm very honored to be able to present Dr. Mon, one of our newest members of the club. And even though Dr. Mon joined our club recently, some of you remember luncheons in 10, 15 years past when he used to come at my invitation. He spent summers and sabbaticals there working in the Global Studies program that I directed at San Jose State. He was deeply impressed with our club, with its activities, and esprit de corps. So when he moved here permanently last year, he decided he wanted to become a member. So I've sponsored him. He's going to be a breakaway success in Rotary. He represents the Sikh religion in Punjab, his native land, but he's now a permanent resident of San Jose. He got his whole family here, and he'll talk about that. In addition to getting acquainted to our club, he's participated in activities in his native India, and he'll talk a little bit about his engagement with Rotary before he's joined our club. So please seek him out and get acquainted, and he's a very fascinating member of our club, and I hope you enjoy meeting him. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Michael Conniff and Mr. President Steve. I greet you and I say Sat Shri Akal. Please say Sat Shri Akal. Thank you. I have been given 2 minutes, and I would request you, while going into the gallery, please read my introduction. So I want to sing today, I want to dance today, our Bhangra dance from India, but Mr. President says we'll give you another opportunity. Thank you very much for the quiet privilege, and I don't want to miss this opportunity that the President of the SJSU, Steve Prezi, is here. So it's really gratifying for all of us, and for me particularly, who is yet to join the faculty next week. Thank you so much for the generous introduction. Professor Michael Conniff, he is my friend, philosopher and guide, but he always declines my offer. Thank you so much.
Brian Adams, can you come up for a moment? And Karen Fox, would you come up also? We're going to talk about an event, a very creative event called Mini Masters.
I was about to break into song there for a moment. Real quick, I am going to, pardon the pun, tee up Karen Fox. Thank you. I'll wait for the groan. I want to give a little background of how this event started when I was president in 2015, 2016. Prior to that, I was always asked, hey, are you going to play in the golf tournament this year? And my response was always, when we have a miniature golf tournament, I'll be there. So the year I was president, the Fun and Friendship Committee, Karen Philbrick, I think Alita Bray, I'm not sure who else was involved at the time, launched the Brian Adams Mini Masters Golf Tournament, and I'm so happy that they're bringing it back again this year, and I really encourage you all to participate. It's a great time that you can have with your family, with your grandkids, with your kids, and just come out and have a good time, and Karen will tell you how that can all happen. Thanks again for bringing it back.
Good afternoon. How do you like can you hear me? How do you like my jacket? I think I look rather masterful. Thank you for that introduction, past President Brian Adams. I wanted to, again, explain that it was this miniature golf event that happened during his tenure in 2015. And this event, this Brian Adams Mini Masters was so incredibly successful that it attracted over 50 participants. We'd like to do that again. The Fun and Friendship Committee will bring back this highly anticipated event. It will be at Emerald Hills Golfland in San Jose. It'll be May 21st at 10 a.m. And it will be highly challenging. And I know some of you will feel a little bit intimidated. You may not feel that your golf game is up to par, but you need not know how to play golf to join in the fun. Everyone is welcome. Space is unlimited. As far as the green fees, they are nominal, let me tell you. Unlike those other pricey golf clubs, adults pay $35. Kids and teens that are 5 to 17 years old only pay $10. And it is free for your children who are 4 years of age and younger. Now, we want to have a fair competition. It's very important. So a panel of mini master judges will be on site, and they will determine the winners and present awards right on site. And there's more. Every attendee will get the full VIP treatment. They will partake in a pizza party in a private room on site immediately after playing golf, right? So bring your family, bring your friends, start thinking about that foursome you want to assemble, or if you don't have friends, we will assign you to a team. Sign up in the Summit Center lobby today through May 18th, or register online. You won't want to miss this time-honored tradition, a tradition unlike any other. Hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian and Karen. Next up, we have Mauricio Cordova and Brenda Sweeney. They're going to talk about the Red Badge Spring Project.
Wow. Am I supposed to sing now? That's not going to happen. Of course, my daughter won't let me do it anyway. All right. So, we don't see the screen. Light up? Oh, there it is. Leslie couldn't be here today, but instead of that, I got the lovely Brenda Sweeney to help me with this. Thank you. We're going to talk to you about the Red Badge Committee Spring Project. It's going to be at the Animal Assisted Happiness, May 7th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And to give you more details on that, Brenda.
Yes, so the Red Badge Committee is actually doing this in conjunction with the Pause Committee this year. Animal Assisted Happiness, I don't know, for those who were here at a meeting probably about a month or so ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, they actually came and did a presentation virtually. But anyway, what it is they are all volunteers. And so what happens is they get local folks to help them do things. And they have a big project coming up, which is basically decomposed granite and basically updating their walkways. However, one of the things for everyone who's going to know, I don't want you to hesitate now, they do have other lightweight work like chasing cobwebs and things like that. So we're basically going to go and help clean up the place, lay out some new walkways. We have some painted rocks that we've done that we're going to drop off. So it should be a lot of fun. It'll be outdoors, so it'll be really great, a lot of fun. But we're looking forward to doing it with the Red Badge Committee, because the Pause Committee hasn't been able to do much in this time of COVID as well. So we're pretty excited about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Brenda and Mauricio. Leslie Hamilton. Leslie, where are you? I don't get Leslie up here on the stage very often, so let's give her some love right now.
Well, thank you. So we're going to play a little game today called Two Truths and a Lie, and I'm looking for a victim. Mary Beth Riley hasn't been here for so long. Come on up. All right, we've got some updates. We thought we'd have a little fun. Yeah, so here's our first day. The Fairmont Hotel is now the Signia by Hilton, San Jose, and opened this week.
That's true.
This is only the third Signia by Hilton in the world. Hang on, you got one more before. We met with Hilton and city representatives to begin negotiating lunch service.
I think that's all true. No, it's not. This
So
is
we
only-
have just the second Signia by Hilton in the world. The others in Florida, they'll be underwater soon, so we'll be number one. But
So Mary Beth, the
I
name.
know I should come more often,
Mary
and then I
Beth,
would know this stuff.
The name of the segment is Two Truths
Oh, one
and
lie.
a Lie.
Got
Okay?
it, yeah.
It's called Two Truths and a Lie. Go ahead, Leslie.
let's have Alfreda. Let's give you a break. We'll bring up Alfreda.
Thanks, Mary Beth.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Mary Beth. All right, Alfreda. Our spring barbecue is June 8th. There's no meeting that day. Truth. The Rotary Playground expansion groundbreaking is on Sunday at 9 o'clock.
Not true.
Sal Pizarro has asked the Hilton for orange and black table settings during his year.
Not true.
Sal's a Dodger fan.
Okay.
And that's Two Truths and a Lie.
Leslie Hamilton. Irma Garcia is going to talk about the DEI committee that we formed a few months ago, and they've been doing work. Before Irma speaks, though, I just want you all to understand the way this work is happening. So we appointed what I think is sort of a blue ribbon commission to work on this diversity issue for our club. They are going to meet for at least during my year, and maybe it'll flow into Sal's year. That'll be up to Sal. I think Sal's saying yes. And then they will make recommendations to the club board, and the actual implementation of all this will happen when the club board reviews all of the recommendations and makes a decision. So with that, Irma Garcia.
All right. Hey, Rotarians, it's been a minute. I'd like to introduce you to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee, DI Advisory Committee for short. When I first joined Rotary, I was really surprised that there wasn't already a DEI committee in place, and I thank Steve for taking that feedback to heart and kicking off this committee. If I could have the members who are here stand. So to drive home the purpose behind this committee, I'm going to hit on two examples very quickly. The first one was the fact that after this ad hoc committee was put in place, I had two women come forward and explain that there were some incidents that had occurred where they were made to feel uncomfortable by a fellow Rotarian. These aligned with their gender and specifically their physical form. The second happened during our fantastic International Women's Day event, where a non-San Jose Rotarian was using the opportunity to be photographed with as many ethnically diverse people as possible in a shameful publicity stunt. These two examples are only examples. I take into consideration the fact that most people don't come forward when these incidents happen and that they take them on the chin. And so, with that in mind, we've developed 3 short-term goals as a committee that we hope to address really soon, since Steve's term is almost over. But Sal has endorsed the continuation of these little projects for the ad hoc committee. And so the first, and what I feel is most important, is a reporting and accountability system for these types of incidents. We hope to present the board with a procedure for handling these types of issues so that we can mitigate them and get ahead of them before they start to really escalate. The second is an updated DEI statement, which, not that there's anything horribly wrong with the one we have, but it is from before the pandemic, and as we know, a lot happened over the last 3 years. And lastly, because education is the best form of preventing these types of incidents, we hope to find a speaker that's going to address very Rotary-specific issues so that we are all on the same page in terms of what we can do on a personal level and as small groups to address these problems. With that, I hope that you will support this committee's endeavors, and that you'll join me in trying to make a difference and make Rotary more diverse and inclusive.
And make Rotary better, I'll point out. Lena Broido, are you here, Lena? Come on up to the stage. So Lena is an old friend of many of ours. It's interesting that the former Fairmont reopened yesterday as Signia by Hilton. Lena worked at the Fairmont, come on up, Lena, for 20 years, 30 years, a long time. She was the face of the Fairmont, and she really functioned during those years as the welcoming committee for our city. And any of you who've been around for a while know that that's all true. So a week or so ago, I was with Lena, and she gave me this beautiful scarf. So she, as a member of the Rotary Club of Los Altos, took it upon herself to get fabric and make these scarves that are in the colors, I'm sure it's obvious to all of you out there, of the Ukrainian flag. So she's been making these, selling them, and then donating the money to various causes in Ukraine. So I want to have Lena just take a minute and tell you about her vision in doing this and what beautiful work it is. So with that, Lena Broido.
It's so nice to be back, really. My favorite city and wonderful people. I'm wearing these glasses because I'm not from Hollywood. I have eye surgery, so it's hard to see with the lights like that. So, but I had to see you all with my real vision. So I heard that Steve attended the conference. It was a district conference last weekend, and he presented the scarf to the district governor. So since he doesn't have one now, I'm going to present you with it.
I was saying to Lena earlier that her idea of these scarves really is something that could have scaled and been done by every Rotary Club in the world. And if I had more time, I think I would work on that. But it's just a good example of the fact that we as an individual can come up with some kind of initiative that's creative and symbolic and beautiful and raises money at the same time. So I really felt sort of commonality with Lena about what we've been trying to do in the last 5 meetings or so, and what she's doing. And I hope that we all as individuals and Rotary clubs throughout the world all manifest this generosity and try to help these poor souls in Ukraine. Clarence Stone, want to come up for a second? I'm not sure what he's going to do, but he's going to do something that hopefully will be at least a little bit entertaining, if not interesting.
Okay, that's a bit of a ruse. I was supposed to do the Rotary moment. And I'm sure, thank you. I'm sure you all don't want to hear my Rotary moment. It'll be a yawner. I love all things Rotary, but my Rotary moment will be a get off the stage, Clarence. All right, so how about do you mind if I tell a joke? All right, does that be okay? All right, so here's the joke. So this gruff Texan at the turn of the century is having a conversation with his young daughter, and she says, or asks him, "Daddy, what's the secret to living a long life?" And he responds, "Darling, let me tell you what the secret is. Every morning, sprinkle a little gunpowder on your breakfast, and you'll live a long life." And sure enough, she did. She lived to be 103. And she left behind 5 children, 15 grandchildren, 30 great-grandchildren, and a 40-foot hole where the crematorium was.
Think about it for a moment, you'll get it. I've got a request to all of you in the room and also all of you on Zoom, which is invite another member of our club to come to a meeting before I'm finished in a couple of months. You're going to have Sal Pizarro up here before you know it. So would you just call one friend who's a member and say, come to a meeting? We know some people have sensitivities around health and COVID, and I fully respect that. But I think for many people, the reason they're not coming back to meetings is that they've gotten into the habit of either sitting at their desk watching Zoom or just not being engaged. So my request for all of you in the room, call a friend before next week. And of those 38 people we have on Zoom today, first, hello, Zoomers. Thanks for joining us. And please come join us one of these days. So Jason Alexander is going to introduce today's program. So please welcome Jason Alexander to the stage.
Good afternoon, my friends. Good to see you. Our speaker today is someone I feel like I need to watch my words around. He's a professor of rhetoric at San Jose State, and there are a couple of his former students here, which I didn't realize. Well, I mean, I kind of knew. How many? There's at least two in here who have learned how to watch their words with Professor Ryan Skinnell. I thought I would also take this moment, though, if you don't already know, this year the program committee adopted a kind of quasi-mission statement. I wanted to read a part of that as a kind of way of introducing you to Ryan's talk today. It reads, and like I said, I'm just going to read a part of it. The mission of the program committee of Rotary Club of San Jose is to bring to our fellow Rotarians strong speakers who are informative and entertaining, and whose words and thoughts can contribute to a civil public discourse on important issues. Our program lineup routinely features speakers who discuss local, national, and international events, arts and culture, scientific inquiry, sports, community service, various Rotary activities. In putting together the lineup, we strive to offer a diversity of viewpoints, global perspectives, cultural backgrounds, and life experiences. We try to be mindful of Rotary's four-way test, and it's an important aim of both the program committee and of the Rotary Club of San Jose that speakers represent the community in which we live and which we strive to serve. I mention that because Ryan's talk today is kind of uniquely positioned in relationship to that mission that I just articulated to you. He's going to talk to us today about demagoguery, authoritarian politics, and public discourse. And I believe he's also going to give us some lessons to consider in terms of our thoughts about our own public speech. So I want to introduce to you Professor Ryan Skinnell.
Thank you for having me. In response to Jason's request, I've written a 27-hour speech. So I will appreciate your indulgence. As you can see from up here, I'm talking today about demagoguery, authoritarian politics, and public discourse. I study rhetoric, and in particular what I study is extremist rhetoric. So I'm writing a book right now, for example, about Hitler's rhetoric. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about how people like us, people who are good people, people who care about their families and care about their neighbors and care about their colleagues and friends and want to see the best things happen in the world, end up doing, in some cases, really awful, horrible, terrifying things. Yes, there, okay. So my opening slide, obviously I have a slightly different title. Okay. This is a painting by a Mexican painter, Jose Clemente Orozco, called El Demagogo, painted in 1946. And I think it's just my new favorite painting. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of what we think of when we think about demagoguery. And I think everybody probably in the room has some sense of what they think of when they think of demagoguery. And that definition likely comes from Cleon. In 427 BCE, so about 2,500 years ago, Cleon was in the Athenian assembly. And Athens at that time had a military alliance with Mytilene. But Mytilene didn't want to pay the tribute that they were supposed to pay every year, and so they tried to revolt against Athens. It failed spectacularly. And the Athenian assembly got together and they decided that they were going to decide what the consequences would be for the Mityleneans. On the one side, they had Diodotus, whose name I may all have butchered right there, but nevertheless, Diodotus argued that the people who made the decision to go to war, to revolt against Athens, should be punished, but that the average Mitylenean didn't have anything to do with it, wasn't involved with it, and therefore they should continue to be treated as allies. On the other side, Cleon argued that all Mityleneans are cut from the same cloth. All Mityleneans think the same way, and therefore they should all pay the consequences for the bad decisions that their leaders made. So Cleon advocated that all the men in Mytilene should be killed, and all the women and children should be sold into slavery. Fortunately, Diodotus carried the day. But Cleon was not a very popular man among many of his contemporaries, so two of them in particular, Thucydides and Aristophanes, wrote about him as a demagogue. And what they did was they called him in various things that they wrote about him. They said, as a demagogue, he did three things in particular. Number one, he had no regard for the truth. He just said whatever he thought would get people to go his way. Number two, he played on their emotions instead of their logic. And number three, he made promises that he could never have kept. He just promised anybody everything they wanted. That definition of demagoguery is the one that is the most common in circulation when we think about demagogues today. There are people that play on our emotions, there are people that have no regard for truth, and there are people that will promise anything to get the personal power that they want. So when we think about demagoguery, 2,500 years later, for very particular reasons, we think often about demagogues. So these are three of our favorite targets. Of course, Adolf Hitler. I'm writing a book about him, so I had to put a picture of him, of course. Joe McCarthy in the middle, senator from Wisconsin, Red Scare in the mid-20th century, and then Hugo Chavez, former president of Nicaragua. There are lots of reasons that we think about demagogues when we think about demagoguery. But there are also really negative consequences for thinking in terms only of demagogues. And there are three in particular that I want to talk to you about today. When we think about demagogues as a negative epithet, what it allows us to do is it allows us to identify when they are doing something wrong and to ignore when we are falling in thrall of people who use demagoguery. It allows us to pretend that there is one problem that we can isolate and cut out. And if we are able to do that, then it'll solve all of our problems. So, for example, we might go back in time into 1918, and if we could just take care of Hitler at that time, then none of the things that happened after that would have happened. Now, it's entirely likely that we would not have had the same 20th century if Hitler had died in 1918, but Hitler stepped into a moment where there were lots of people who were saying the same things that he was saying. Hitler was one among many, and he rose to the top, but he was not the only person who was advocating for all of the things that he was advocating for. Finally, the third consequence of thinking about demagogues instead of demagoguery is that it allows us to distance ourselves from consequences, even when we are responsible for them, because we were mesmerized, or we were hypnotized, or we were taken over by the magic man. And so then, when you have millions of people dead, you can say, well, I didn't know. I was tricked. So what I want to advocate, working from the other work that people in my field have done, is to begin to think about how we move from thinking about demagogues, a negative epithet of demagogue, to think in terms of demagoguery. So to move from the figure, the demagogue that we can get rid of, to the discourse. Now I have committed the cardinal sin of PowerPoint of printing very tiny words that you can't possibly read, and now I'm going to read each one to you. Yeah, I know, it's terrible. So this is a definition taken from Patricia Roberts Miller. She is a rhetoric professor emerita at the University of Texas in Austin. She defines demagoguery as 1, a polarizing discourse That 2, promises stability, certainty, and escape from the responsibilities of rhetoric. Through 3, framing public policy in terms of. 4, the degree to which, and 5, means by which, not whether, the out-group should be punished and scapegoated for the current problems of the in-group. I know that's a lot. But essentially what she's arguing is that what demagogues do is they get us to think in terms of simple solutions. We reduce complexity in order to decide that one is good and the other is bad. Anyone who agrees with me is good. Anybody who disagrees with me is bad. And if they are bad, then we need to figure out how we're going to punish them or get rid of them. Okay? In a democracy, the promise of democracy is that everybody will be represented fairly. Right? The promise of democracy is that everybody who is represented by it, their beliefs, their values, their perspectives are legitimate. And that what we will do as a group of people is we will argue, we will disagree, and we will compromise. And in the end, everybody will get something that they need, but nobody will get everything that they need. In order to achieve those goals, we use democratic deliberation. So democratic deliberation, again, this is from Trish Roberts Miller. She gives us 5 characteristics of it. One is inclusion. Everybody has the legitimate perspectives, right? We all come from different backgrounds, we come from different parts of the world, we all have different experiences. All of those are to be treated as legitimate perspectives. Number 2, fairness. I will treat you how you treat me. If it's okay for us in an argument for you to say my mom is ugly, then it is equally okay for me to say your mom is ugly, and that is fine. If what we can agree on is that the rules apply to everybody, right? So if we want to have a good argument, probably we're not going to call each other's moms ugly. But if we're going to call each other's moms ugly, it works everybody for the same for everybody. Third, responsibility. I have to take responsibility for the decisions that I made. Also, because we are often making decisions about things that we don't know the outcomes are, we have to take responsibility for bad choices that we make. 4, self-skepticism. As much as I hate to admit it, I am occasionally wrong. I assume at some point I could be occasionally wrong, I guess maybe is how I put it. Self-skepticism is, again, I have limited perspectives. I can see a lot from where I'm standing, but I cannot see everything. And so I have to be aware that sometimes I may get things incorrect. And then shared stacies, which means we argue about the same thing. If we're arguing about the color of an apple, we can't in the middle of the argument say, well, it's actually a bad apple. It's irrelevant. We're arguing about the color at this point. Okay. So that's the sort of, in very broad strokes, what democracy and democratic deliberation look like. Demagoguery says all those things are stupid. That it's obvious when we are involved in arguments what the right answer is. I know what it is. I feel it in my gut. And I know what the right answer is. It's obvious to anybody with a thinking mind what the answer is. Anybody who is trying to make it more complicated than it obviously is corrupt. Now you see we've gone very quickly from it's an obvious answer, I have it, I'm good. Anybody who wants to make it more complicated is necessarily bad if I'm good. Anybody who wants more complicated discussion is necessarily a bad person. And what do we do with bad people? We'll get to that. To sort of sum this up, what demagoguery does is it shifts the grounds for debate away from evidence, complexity, weighing lots of possibilities, taking all of those things we talked about in the previous slide into consideration, fairness, equality, all of those things. And it reduces them to identity. I am good, the people I agree with are good, you don't agree with me, therefore you are bad. So this is more or less what demagogic logic and rhetoric looks like. These are 4 basic steps. And you can often track these pretty carefully if you're looking at speeches, right? Number 1, we are under attack. The economy is falling apart. We're losing membership. I feel like I am being attacked. I feel like I am not welcome here. Number 2, I'm obviously not attacking myself, and I'm obviously not making this up. There is somebody attacking me. That is the they. They are attacking me. If the economy is bad and they want to do something that I don't think is obviously right, then they have made bad decisions and they are the problem. Now, ordinarily, in a normal circumstance, we'd be able to compromise. But we're in a really urgent situation. And in a really urgent situation, we don't have time for all of the complexity and all the complications. We have to make a decision now, and if we don't make a decision now, we face the very real threat of being eradicated. Therefore, if we know the problem, and we know the cause of the problem, and we know we can't compromise with the evil people who are on the other side, there's only one thing to do, and that's decide if we're going to silence them, remove them, imprison them, deport them, or exterminate them. That's the only real decision you need to make. In lots of domains of culture, we are trained really well to think in these terms, right? Our sports teams, Sal, for example, is a Dodgers fan, and I can now never be Sal's friend as a consequence, right? And that's perfectly logical and reasonable, because why would you want to be friends with a Dodger fan? We are trained to think this way in our media, right? The Montagues and the Capulets. We are trained to think this way in terms of the consumer goods that we enjoy. I am a Pepsi fan. I know, see how quickly, if you really want to get a group of people upset, tell them that you prefer cake to pie and watch people just split down the middle. Oh man. Star Trek, Star Wars, good versus evil, God, Satan, and of course, our sports team. So when we are trained in different domains of culture to think these ways, it seems natural and obvious when we transport that kind of thinking over into our politics. Now, in the previous slide, when we're thinking about the Montagues and the Capulets, or we're thinking about Coke and Pepsi, there's no real major consequences other than the destruction of Sal and my friendship. But there's no consequences for people, right? It doesn't matter in the long run if you are Coke and I am Pepsi. We can figure out ways to get along. But in the domain of politics, and in particular in the domain of policy making, where we decide what policies we're going to have and we're going to decide who those policies affect, it feels often very natural to transport the good versus bad way of thinking about them into our politics, but it's exactly the opposite of what democracy is intended to do. It's exactly the opposite of the way that we are supposed to think about making policy decisions and about the ways that we argue about policy decisions. As Robert Miller says, in a culture of demagoguery, all political issues are reduced to the question of in-group good and out-group bad. And I racked my brain to think about examples that I could give from our current moment. And I decided it would be a terrible idea to do that in front of people whose ideas and values I care very much about. So I'm not going to poison the well. But we certainly could. And in fact, maybe a good example is from Ukraine, right? Russia and Ukraine. You have in Russia, Vladimir Putin, although he is a dictator, Jason and I have thought about this, he still is nevertheless theoretically required to be voted into power every few years. I think it's every 6 years, right? But he still has to maintain a certain semblance of public opinion on his side. And so in arguing for why Russia should invade Ukraine, he argued that it was Nazis, that Ukraine is actually a part of Russia. And therefore, people who don't feel like Ukraine is a part of Russia are people who don't really have Russia and Ukraine's best interests in mind, and those people are Nazis. And everybody knows what Nazis are. Nazis are bad. Nazis are the worst. Therefore, we are perfectly within our rights to invade Ukraine to drive out the Nazis, because it's the Nazis who are ruining everything. That's the argument that Putin has made in many places, right? That's part and parcel of what demagoguery is. So as I say this, sort of conclusion that I want us to be thinking about is how we participate in demagoguery. Right? If we move away from thinking about demagogues as devils who do things to us that mesmerize us, we have to begin thinking about the way that we participate in public discourse, the ways that we participate in arguing for or against political policies, for or against people who are running for office, how we participate in politics, and really sort of revel in the complexity of them and value the fact that people are different from us, not just tolerate it, right, but value the fact that people are different from us and advocate on behalf of people who are different from us. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking of both sides, right? Both sides are doing it. If they're going to do it, I should do it too. But in fact, there is no public policy that is that simple. They don't exist. Even the Nazis versus anybody else is not that simple. There are lots of complexities to be weighed. And so I invite all of you, and I try to hold myself also to the standard, to think about the way that you can participate in the world around you in public discourse that allows for and invites the complexity that we hope to see in our politics. Thank you. My pleasure. Yes, I can, but I'm not sure they can.
There's a button on it, Kathleen.
Now? Yeah. Generally, what do you think about Major Rich buying media organizations, specifically Elon Musk and Twitter?
That was my question too.
It's complicated. I mean, on the one hand, Elon Musk has decided that part of the way that he's going to handle public discourse is as a troll, right? As somebody who engages people in ways that are intended to provoke them. Whether or not he runs his companies that way is a different question altogether, right? So that's one set of complexities. Another set of complexities is that Elon Musk is a multi-billionaire who is buying Twitter from a bunch of other billionaires. So I don't know that we know that Musk will be better or worse. I think we have some indications of what his way of engaging is as a public figure. I think we have some indication of what his behavior is like engaging as a CEO and as a businessman. It troubles me more that other billionaires are very excited about it. That troubles me more than the fact that one billionaire has purchased it from several other billionaires. But we stick with it's complicated.
All this misinformation and challenging of the truth so that you don't know which side is right and which side is wrong. How do you, or what do you suggest be done to get the information you presented today to be considered by the average American who can't possibly know which is right and which is wrong? How can you, what do you think would be the thing that we ought to do as a nation to get this kind of discourse
circulated? It's a really good question. The media environment that we find ourselves in at the moment is not new. In fact, fake news is far older and far more prevalent in the history of the world than truthful news, than news we could trust. I have a whole paper you can read about it if you're so inclined. But my answer to your question is that we probably need to back away from assuming that it's something that can be done quickly. That people have been working for a very long time to make the media environment that we currently live in. It's not an accident that we're here. It's not unique that we're here. I mean, social media is certainly unique in the version that it is, but if you study the way that people panic about increases in information, we have very similar moments when TV becomes accessible to everybody and when radio becomes accessible to everybody. And in fact, Plato was arguing 2,500 years ago that we shouldn't write things down because it'll ruin our memories and we won't be able to retain information. So we have a very long history of thinking about how people engage in these places. I know it seems a little Pollyanna-ish, but I'm going to argue that actually us holding ourselves to some account for our own feelings, right, for our own engagements with other people, actually has a lot of effect and power over the long term. It feels sort of not very useful immediately, right? It feels like you're pushing against a huge tide, but in fact, that huge tide is us, right? So I don't have a really easy answer. It's the perfect question, and there is no easy answer. And if I promised you an easy answer, it would essentially be violating all the things I just said that we should do. It's complicated. Thank you.
Thank you for your talk today. What do you think about diversity?
I'm generally pro.
Elaborate more.
I want to talk just briefly as a response to that. I prefer the word difference. I think that there's great value, not just in diversity. To me, I think diversity is wonderful, but diversity often helps us to think about sort of how we'll tolerate other people who are not like us. And I want to think about difference. I want to think about the ways that people's differences actually make my life better, right? That people being different from me is this thing that I should desire, that I should talk to people who are not like me, that I should engage with people who know things that I don't know. And so as much as I value diversity, I also want to think about how passive it can sometimes be. And I want us to engage with people who are different from us because that's a good thing. It's a thing that I like. And you should all do what I like because I like it.
So you bring up the importance of proper political discourse and how we've watched this slowly die over the last couple decades. What would you say would be kind of a mark in that decline?
So I don't believe in proper discourse. I believe in the discourse that we have. I believe that we can quickly and easily get into the trap of thinking that some discourse is legitimate and some discourse is not, when in fact what we have is the discourse that we have. You can pick any moment in time and go back to it, and you can find all the sorts of things that we are dealing with now. Anti-Semitism, racism, homophobia, you name it, it's there at any given time. Which is not to say there have not been ebbs and flows. I think if we were going to mark particular times in the last 30 or 40 years, I might mark the contract with America. I'm sure that other people would pick different moments. So there are certainly times where it feels more dangerous, it feels more threatening. But we're always at that moment, right? We're always at the moment where it feels scary. You can ask anybody who's hiding under a desk in Peoria, Illinois in 1962, right? And so really the time is now. The best time to start having better political discourse is 100 years ago. The second best time is now. So I don't think that there's anything that we could do the sea change, right? Other than make some decisions about how to engage people better. Mr. Alexander.
Hey, Roomies. The Zoomies have a couple questions, so I thought I'd bring them up. So I'm just going to try and bring these together. You touched on some of this already. But let's try and phrase it a little bit differently. You talk a lot about features of demagogic rhetoric. Can you help highlight some of the features of legitimate persuasive discourse so that we might have some strategies for thinking about solutions to demagoguery?
Yeah, so I would go back to democratic deliberation. The way that we do better policy, the way that we do better public discourse is by thinking about the values of our democracy, which are inclusion, fairness, responsibility, self-skepticism, and shared stasis. I can tell you pretty quickly that you can begin to identify demagoguery by noticing when somebody says, such and such is evil, when the thing that is evil is garden variety about the day, right? So I'm trying to think of one that I saw earlier today. It's something like social emotional learning is evil. Now, social emotional learning, as you may or may not know, is one of the things that lawmakers in Florida have recently used to remove a series of math textbooks from classrooms in public schools in Florida. Social emotional learning is a thing that is much debated among educators. It may be bad. There's lots of evidence that suggests it's quite good, that it actually helps students learn, but it's not perfect, right? It's quite complicated, and people are still arguing about it. So painting it as evil immediately strips out any of the complexities of that thing.
Jason.
I was going to say, you can begin to look at the opposite for examples of better public discourse. How do we begin to think about the complexities and the ways that we can make decisions that we can't possibly imagine the outcomes of, but that nevertheless take into account fairness, equality, and inclusion?
Thank you, Jason. We have time for one more question and answer. Richard?
I'll try to be quick. Thank you very much. Very important topic. Does Sal know that the Giants are ahead of the Dodgers in the standings right now?
That is the best final question. We
That's
should
not my
stop
question.
there.
I'm gonna make it real easy for you. So most of my family in Northern California is liberal. I have a big family in Texas as well. They're so, but there's one person over there that's very, very extreme right. So my sister says, "You're the elder here. Talk to Sam." So I'd like to.
Ryan, could you make the answer brief, please?
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
this was actually the other 26 hours of the talk that I wrote. It is easy to begin to think about people. So I have family members who are also gun hoarding. I think one of them actually thinks the world is run by lizards. I mean, I think he believes that. But when I see him in person, it turns out we have a lot in common. We don't have our politics in common at all, right? But often the people that we disagree most vehemently with about our politics are people who we agree with very much about things like family, perhaps your faith, perhaps a whole series of other things. And what we know about people who are engaged in extremist discourses, from conspiracy theories to cults to any other sort of extreme discourse, is that the way that people begin to come out of them is very slowly, over time, in engagement with people who love them and care about them. So I will promise you that if you sit down with your nephew or your whoever this family member is and say, "Stop being a crazy idiot," it's probably not going to work. But over the course of time, if you begin to build relationships where you see their humanity and their values that you care about, and they begin to see yours in ways that are mutually beneficial, then that's how you get people to agree and like each other.
Thanks, Ryan, today. We are making a donation in your name, Ryan, to Asian Americans for Community Involvement, a wonderful organization, and thank you again. Everyone, don't leave yet. 30 seconds. Just a reminder, this Sunday at 9 a.m. at the Play Garden, there's going to be an event announcing some improvements to the Play Garden, which is already a wonderful place. Next week, we will be ringing the bell and having a wine reception, compliments of our buddy Bert George. Next week's speaker is Darius Teeter from the Stanford Seed Program, talking about building prosperity in Africa and South Asia with the Stanford community. And with that, meeting adjourned. Thanks.